The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships. It creates language for what motivates us and helps us look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram is a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name is Jeff Cook. I'm a longtime professor of philosophy in Greeley, Colorado. With me is TJ Wilson, coffee guru, lover of theology, and Enneagram ninja.
Hello.
My man.
Hey.
We are talking with one of our favorite people in the world, the one and only Beth McCord.
Hey, welcome back.
Hey, thank you for having me back. This is going to be so fun.
Yes.
Beth is not only an Enneagram expert and can talk with great depth and understanding about all the types, but we get a chance to talk to her about that number, which is closest to her, which is the number 9, which is her type.
The best one.
So we are doing the deep dive into 9s. This may be, in all of podcast world, in the history of time, we may have more Enneagram 9 knowledge sitting at the table presently than has ever been assembled. So
Maybe.
I will be the first one to hear the goodness. I suppose there's probably been some panels, but
Yeah, absolutely.
what do those people know?
They only know their own experience. That doesn't count.
Well, for those of you familiar with this series, we are going through our top 10 questions for each of the Enneagram types, expose the different layers, elements of each of the types, and we're going to do that with Beth now. So,
Well, I'm curious, Beth, where are you right now?
I am in my studio. So we live in just south of Nashville, Tennessee. And so like a good Nashvilleian, you got to have a studio in your home. So being your Enneagram coach, we do, lots of online courses and webinars and all that kind of good stuff. And my husband was so kind to put a studio in used to be our walk-in attic space. No longer is it that. So that is currently where I'm at.
Perfect.
it's good use of the attic.
It is, yeah.
Much better than ours, which is, I believe, the dump is what our attic ought to be called.
Our garage has become that.
Well, the first question that all the types need to answer is, what is their motive? The way we phrase this with our first question is just, what do you want most? When thinking about your 9-ness and how that gets expressed, how would you say this is as a 9, this is what I want most?
Wow. I mean, I think the biggest thing for people to understand about a 9 is like anytime you ask a 9 a question, the first thing I feel is like a deer in headlights. Even though I have the questions that you're going to ask me today in front of me, once it's asked to me, I'm slightly panicked inside or a wide range of panic. So sometimes it's like, oh no, I got this, maybe, to I literally have no idea. And the reason why I say that is because the 9s, it's like we have an internal fog, and that fog, the fog's density changes. So there are seasons or topics that I have no clue about myself. And then there's other seasons where maybe I've grown or I've learned about myself, I've done some self-awareness, and that fog has become more like a haze. But no matter what, we have anywhere from a haze to a deep fog. And the deeper and thicker the fog, the slower we kind of have to walk, which means like processing and understanding ourselves, which can really annoy some Enneagram types. I won't name any.
8s and 1s and 3s.
Exactly. But what I do is, and this all gets to my point of what I want most. For us, in order for us to understand ourselves, we need space and time to walk our own path of discovery and understanding. And depending on how thick and dense that fog is, will determine how long and how hard that is going to take. And depending on the internal or external pressure put upon us to answer that question, greatly impacts our ability to answer that question and the time it takes to answer that question. Because let's say that, the three of us were at my house and we step outside, and let's just pretend that there is, let's say, I live outside of Nashville, but let's say we live in downtown Nashville. Like, like we walk outside and there's some stores just down the block and we want to go to the pizza shop. Well, for the 8s, it's a clear day. It's bright and sunny. They can see exactly where they're going. No problem at all. They're going to get there in like the fastest time possible. Then you got other types, they're going to, take their time. But then us 9s, again, we have that fog. And it's going to take us however long it needs to take to get to that location. And so, but the great thing about fog is when you take the next step or when you're driving, you can see a little bit ahead of you, depending on, how much fog there is and how dense it is. You can see right around you. So you want to keep moving forward. And 9s, that's a huge encouragement to all of us to keep moving towards self-awareness. It can feel daunting. It can feel frustrating. Everyone's upset with us because we don't know what we want. We get upset with ourselves for not knowing what we want. But if we just take those steps forward with whatever pace that we can take over time, we are actually going to get to that place that we need to be. And might I remind everyone, the tortoise beats the hare. So if we're just taking our time and doing it step by step, we will actually get there, and we'll probably get there with much more depth and clarity and understanding that not only benefits us, but everyone around us. So all that to be said, what I want to know most or what I want most.
What do you want most?
I want to know myself with clarity. And I say that without any hindrance because if I'm in the fog, I'm going to pause. I'm going to question. I'm going to not move forward as quickly. But the more that there's a haze and the more there's clarity and vision that I can see, the more I can move quickly and actually go towards the things that I'm actually wanting to obtain. So I'd say just the clarity, the understanding, the insight of myself, and the more I am trying to people please others, which is literally my default, the more the fog gets thick and the harder this process is. So I would say what I want most is clarity and the ability to assert my own essence, my own true self.
Take it away, TJ.
Man, I love that. There's so much there. I love it. I love this idea of the fog. I would, if I ever use it, I'm going to make one little tweak and suggest that when 9 step out the door, we don't know we want pizza yet.
Yeah, that would be true. Yeah. We're following whoever we're with, right? Yep. Oh, wait, there goes the 8. Okay,
and
I guess I'm going to go this way.
Okay, that's where we're going.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. And then when we get to the pizza place, it's like, oh, okay, I can have pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I will say, what's really kind of a superpower we have that I don't think people necessarily like, because they want the opposite, and I think we do too. We know what we don't want, and that can give you clues into the direction that you actually do want to head in. Like, okay, you don't want to turn left, got that. Okay, so do you want to go forward or do you want to go right? And that can kind of help us. And I wish it was the opposite. I wish we just knew exactly what we wanted, but that's just not.
But that fog is ever present. Like, there are some times where the fog descends while I am listening to someone speak.
Yes.
Like in the middle of their sentence, I may lose half of it.
Yep.
There are times when the fog is so thick that I'm not even sure that I'm outside. And there are times when like I'm just moving through the fog regardless of what's happening, and I don't really know where I'm going. There are times when I actually, I'm going to sit down and hang out until the fog dissipates.
Yep.
Like that idea. Yeah. And it is about, I don't think there's a need for a surety. I don't feel like is the right word for me, but I want to have clarity to make the quote unquote right decision, not necessarily correct, but whatever fits, the thing that fits for this moment. I want to be able to know that this is the right thing for this time.
And when you say that, so I loved some of the things that you said, because for me, it's kind of like when we're driving in fog and we really can't see much ahead of us. If we at least have a car's red lights in front of us, we at least know we're kind of going in the direction, right? You know, and we got to be careful, how close you are to them. And that's kind of like, when we walk out of the door and we don't know which way we want to go or what we need to have happen. A lot of times we'll see someone move in a direction and we'll follow.
Yeah.
And that can be good or bad. It's not necessarily one or the other, but it gets in the more negative category when I'm doing it just out of ease versus taking the time to know my own path. It's like, do I really want to take the time to figure this out, or am I just going to follow someone? And usually I just follow someone. And during that situation, the fog doesn't ever get lighter because I am not trying to understand my true self, the path that I want to go down. Yeah. But I'm like, hey, that's okay. They're right here. Or I might put my hand on their shoulder and just kind of let them lead me along
Look
the
around,
way.
see if you can see anything else on the way. Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And
hey, look, there's a
then
statue.
We're just walking along and maybe we'll get to that restaurant. And let's say it's a restaurant, a food choice. Like, I don't like oysters, me personally. And like, if we were to show up, that person that I was, following, and we showed up to an oyster bar, I'd be like, oh gosh, no, I don't want to be here. And then everyone's like, well, then why were you heading in this direction? It's like, I don't know. I was just following you.
I'm just along for the ride.
And so, and they're like, well, what do you want? And then I'm like, I don't know. Then we're stuck right back in that category. And so that's why I kind of go back to what I really want is clarity of myself. And if I were to put on, I don't know if this is a selfish thing, but if I were to just say it bluntly, I just want it to be easy. Like, why can't the fog just lift? Like, but that will get into a bunch of the other questions about ease. But yeah, so I think that's what I would say I want most is clarity, because I think clarity, my own clarity, actually is what creates inner peace and external peace. And that doesn't necessarily mean peace like no one's, against each other or there's no conflict, but if we all know that we are being clear within ourselves and with others, there is to a certain level a sense of peace.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And this is kind of fun because I've never really had this kind of conversation. And so I'm also learning about myself as we walk through the fog together.
Love it.
As a philosopher, I heard two things there. One, I love the fact that how you answer the question is much more in self-discovery. This is always good. I was going to say, neither one of you have apparently read any Enneagram books, because the correct answer to what do I want as a 9 is for things to be harmonious, calm, peaceful.
We did say that.
Well, I think, and that's why I said that towards the end, because it's like, I feel like I will experience harmony and peace when I have clarity of myself. Now, again, that doesn't mean that I will have the harmony that a less aware 9 is looking for. Because like there's a harmony that a average to less healthy 9 is looking for, and that is everyone be happy, even if I'm not happy. But I think real harmony and real peace comes from knowing myself in a way that I am granting and myself the permission to assert my voice and my thoughts, knowing that people could and will disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine because I'm okay with me.
I would love to speak to, I hadn't thought about this. I thought we were going to have to spend a lot of time on processing center later on. And I felt like your answer just nailed everything that I've kind of been searching for language for 9s, in that 3, 6s, and 9s all have energy that's going both inward and outward. And as you're processing, it's very cognitive, where 9s are a body type. And yet to understand who you are in the world, the pivot's going to move to your head, And it's not going to be just inward, it's going to be outward, as you were saying. It's not only what's going on inside me, but what's going on inside me in relation to those around me. And that's where it feels like that's where the sweet spot is and it's in that spaces where the ease, the harmony, the connection is longing to be had. And again, it feels like it's a very cognitive move. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like it's easier for me to be focused on others. And when anyone is, and it's like there's a wide range. This is like a spectrum. Anyone is disgruntled, upset, unhappy, whatever you want to call it. Anything that is not happy, basically, or pleased, it consumes my energy, my thoughts, my emotions, my focus. It's like a magnet. It just derails me unless I am grounded and aware of myself in a healthy way. Because even when I'm healthy, I can still get derailed. But if I'm in a healthier spot and am able to ground myself, I can kind of get back into who I am, what my clarity is, and then move in the right direction. But it's really hard because like, okay, that person's upset. And then I have to funnel through all these thoughts and feelings like, is this okay? Is this not okay? Is it okay if they're just upset? Like, can I be okay? Are they okay? I mean, there's just a billion things going on at one time. But I think the sad thing for the 9 is that I am quickly willing to forego my own peace in order to make others happy for a facade of peace.
I want to circle back to that because that was the other thing that hit me, the illustration of not knowing what you want to eat or foregoing your own peace. I want to pair that later, perhaps with being action repressed and perhaps being just moving away from one's own body into those other centers. I'm going to bring that back up in a bit. But I think that's incredibly helpful. Anything else on motive, TJ?
This is such a fascinating sort of other angle to me about what that desire for harmony can look like, and very much like wanting to see through the fog, wanting to get a little bit more clarity of myself, what I want, what I desire in the spaces that I'm in. Helps me understand what is needed in those spaces. Like the less fog there is, we're more able to embrace the harmony that is out there and figure out where things go.
But we can't have harmony if we are forgoing ourselves.
Right. Yep.
But that's the more typical, easier path that the 9 will go in.
Avoiding conflict.
But we'll think we're having harmony because like, hey, everyone in my family right now is happy. And it's like, yeah, but are you happy?
Right.
You know? And it's like, we won't even answer that question for ourselves. It's like, I don't even want to answer that question. I don't even want to have to look at it because if everyone else is happy, I don't even care if I'm frustrated or upset or disgruntled. Like that doesn't need to matter. Yeah. I will just shut down. I will numb out. So we trick ourselves that there's harmony around us or peace, and really there is not because we don't have the internal harmony and peace.
We're kind of sitting on this, so I'll just there's no reason that these need to be in order. I'm not one who needs to have things a certain way. I will let you know, Beth. What I'm hearing just as y'all are speaking is something like I'm willing to, at cost to myself, go for some other goal. And the goal ends up being an emotional, cognitive one. It's not a physical one. Like I will forego my appetite, my desire for pizza in order to have some sort of, I assume your mental life, you are foregoing comfort in one sphere. I would be curious if it's foregoing comfort in the more mental sphere.
I would say yes, but I would say that it is a gut reaction first and foremost. So when things are broken or so like when someone else is, like I said, any level of being upset or unhappy, my whole entire system is disrupted. And it's almost like an internal vibration of uncomfortableness. And depending on the level of their dissatisfaction, the level of intensity of that internal vibration that's uncomfortable. And how I describe it with, so when I describe the gut center, the 8s, 9s, and 1s, the 8s are like a 2-liter Diet Coke with the lid off of it, and life and circumstances are Mentos being thrown in, and then they viscerally, react. But then it's over. It's done. They express themselves or whatever. The 1s, on the other hand, are like a 2-liter Coke with the lid, half on, half off. It's just, it's not all the way tight, but it's, it's almost there. But life and circumstances are shaking it up. And so the anger of the 1 kind of comes out sideways. They're trying to repress it, but it still comes out. And it can be kind of this cold, nitpicky judgment. But us 9s, we've got our 2-liter Coke and we have that sucker tight. It's like, I am not letting whatever is internal to come out and disrupt anything. So we got it really, really solidly tight. But life and circumstances are just shaking us up. And I mean, the littlest shake to the greatest of shakes, right? And as we know, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter how much a Coke is being shooken up, but even a little bit, there's a lot of disruption going on, right? A lot of pressure internally. And so no matter what level of pressure is being built up, all I can think of is, please make it stop. And then I'm thinking of all the ways that I can make it stop, this body sensation that I'm absorbing the energy, the uncomfortable energy of others. And so all I want to do is either make other people happy as quick as possible, or take my 2-liter Coke and go somewhere else and put it on a shelf to let it calm down. The unfortunate thing is sometimes that lid does come off, and there are ramifications and consequences to that. So it's, 9s every once in a blue moon get really upset or rage or overly express themselves, and nobody really knows what to do with it because it's so infrequent. And then it just causes its own ripple effect. Now, in some ways, my body feels like, whew, okay, got that out of there. But I also can see externally the ramifications that has had. And therefore, I internally become upset or distraught because of my own actions. And so my thought process goes into, I shouldn't have asserted myself, which basically means I shouldn't have erupted, shouldn't have expressed my anger in whatever form or fashion I did. I will double down and make sure that lid doesn't come off again. And therefore we go the same issues and problems, versus learning how to, when life and circumstances and people or whatever it is are shaking us up, how do we undo the lid, like all of us have done, where you undo it just a little, and then before it gets too crazy and overflowing, you close it and let it kind of calm down a little bit and open it a little and close it. That would be, for me as a type 9, learning how to understand my internal world, that I need to express myself, but I need to do it when it's happening, before it gets too big, so that I can have more self-emotional regulation in the space, so that I can assert my voice, assert my feelings to others, and ask or say what I need and have boundaries. But that is one of the hardest things I'm going to ever do on this planet. So, and I mean for 9s too. But that would be the goal, for us 9s to recognize it's not a either or. And I think that's how we've lived our lives. I either keep the lid tightly on, and either I'm going to run away, withdraw, or I'm going to eventually explode. And usually the explosion happens with our family. Now, my daughter said once, because I said, I feel like I'm Dr. Banner and I become the Hulk, and she's like, Mom, that may be true for you, but your Hulk is like a foot tall. But to me, it feels like it's like the real thing, like the real Hulk. And I mean, I was glad that what it felt like to me wasn't what others are experiencing, but it feels horrible. And I think that for us nines to recognize there is a healthier way to express ourselves. All that to be said, I'm going back into, I know you were talking about the cognitive space, which there's a lot going on in the mind of the nine, because I'm processing things that are happening externally and internally, but a lot of it has to do with the uncomfortableness of the energy that I am absorbing or picking up from others.
Yeah, and like thinking about that and sort of meshing it with the idea of the fog, like it is a felt sense of that fog. It's the like the energy comes into our bodies. It comes in like we often feel it before we have any idea that it's actually there.
Absolutely.
All of a
true.
sudden, it's like I'm shaking and I don't know why. Why did I just start sweating so badly? Like, what happened? And it's because there is something tangible happening in this relationship, in this interaction. It could be good, it could be bad, it could we feel it in our bodies. But then we have to figure out what to do with it with our brains, with our minds, and like the fog being there, that like coming to a place where we understand what those feelings are and what to do with it. That is so much more cognitive than it is felt. We don't know what the fog is doing to us.
Yeah.
Is the fog your intuitional knowledge? Then I missed that. That's good. Okay, so you are displaced, or you're moving away from your primary center. This will be, just to get into Enneagram speak here, you are taking the world in through your intuitions, but the fog is that you can't connect to your intuitions.
Yeah.
So it's not the mental side, which is more deductive. This is, you're trying to get in tune with your intuitional knowledge, and that's the fog. Am I wrong there?
Trying to think. I think it can. I think the this is why it's so frustrating. It's like I love being a 9. It's so amazing, and it's so frustrating. And I know every type could say that about their type. Sure. The frustrating thing is the fog. It envelops my intuition, my gut, my emotions, and my head.
Okay.
And
so it
so
spills over.
It's all of it, and that doesn't mean it's all of it at the same degree in any moment, because sometimes I can feel my emotions. I can feel my anger a lot, which is interesting because I have a lot of 9s that say, I don't even know what anger feels like. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about?
Ever present. I always feel it. Always.
Yes. I go, it's like a volcano just simmering underneath the hood right there. Now, I don't know if it's because I've done a lot of self-work and understanding, but actually I know growing up with a brother that teased me a lot, I ended up getting complex PTSD.
Sure.
And so I'm hyper vigilantly waiting for someone to do something that's going to upset me or hurt me or whatever. Now that I don't live in that world anymore, but everything can feel that I'm on the precipice of that. And so that frustration that I had growing up, I think for me as a 9, even though I was always trying to keep the peace, the target always moved and I could never keep the peace. And so there was always this anger and frustration, like, why can't we just get along? Like, why can't you just like me? So that being said, I do feel a sense of anger, but I think it has more to do, and I was talking to my counselor about it, and he said, Beth, it's actually terror, because rage is terror, and you were constantly in that state, and so your body is just waiting for something to happen again. And so it's just good for me to understand all that. Again, I think all of these things that when we unpack our story, they help us, no matter what type we are, to understand why we react the way we react. And I, as a 9, am going to react to my past trauma in a 9 way. I am always forever trying to keep that lid on the 2-liter Coke. and go along with everyone, but then sometimes it just erupts or I withdraw and I numb out. So I think it's really helpful for us to understand all of those different layers. But all that to go back to what you were saying, I do feel the fog affects all of those areas. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. And coming, like, the clarity that we're seeking is to be able to see through the fog to all those different places and when the information comes in through our body, we're still struggling to figure out what it is and where it goes.
Yeah.
We stepped out into the fog, and now, like, we have this information. We know there are buildings around us, but we can't see what they are until we start to get some of that clarity, move a little closer. Yeah.
And I think this is what can be really frustrating for those that are not nines, because, and I feel bad for other people, because it's like, okay, well, so what are you thinking? I don't know.
Thinking like 1,000
what are you
things
feeling?
and nothing.
Yeah, right. What are you feeling? Again, I'm feeling a bunch of stuff, but I can't nuance it. And then, well, what does your gut say? And it's like, heck do I know? But now there are times where I will have great clarity of mind and feelings and my gut. But again, that goes back to that whole idea of fog versus haze. The haze is when I'm more grounded, I'm more self-aware, I'm doing my own inner work, I'm believing and trusting my true self, that it has value, and I'm bringing that to the forefront, and really stepping into it sometimes with kind of just trusting that it's the right thing to do, not necessarily knowing what's going to happen with it. So I'll let you guys.
As a non-9, what I'm hearing from both of you is something that, just to circle back to your center, you are a body type, and you're bringing in the world through your body, which is a present place to be. And for all of us, 8s, 9s, and 1s, we are resistant to the present. Control and autonomy issues are expressed, I think you said this very well, Beth, in very different ways. We are seeking control. We're seeking oversight. You had said earlier, you know what you don't want to do. And that is a control phrase as I heard it. It was like, look, I don't want to be moved or manipulated some way. The emotion, the underlying feeling that's going to come out in terms of control issues is anger. So what you do with your anger. And we pivoted to the stance of 9s, which is commonly just going to be pushing into that withdrawal space. And the way I'm going to establish control is I'm going to take a big step back. I'm going to create a new line. I'm going to hope that you don't step over this line this time. But the further you get pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, that anger is not going away. You have the same energy going in you that 8s do. As was said, it's the same Mentos going in the bottle. So what I hear, I assume that you both would say that you have control issues, yeah?
Oh yeah.
Heck yeah.
And those are confronted at some point. It can be the spilling out of anger, but my assumption is that you have preferences that are different, and they pivot you towards your stance. It's both the taking a step back, but it's also incorporating past tools to address things. It's like, I know what has happened in the past when I've gotten angry here, and this has worked, and I will try this. Or I know that I can go to this happy place where nobody bugs me, and this is what works. So moving to our question 4, which is how do I solve problems, or when do I solve problems? 4s, 5s, and 9s are all using past tools to address their problems. Am I wrong in saying that that's what's taking place in your engagement of the world?
Oh, 100%.
What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, everything is categorized as a rule based off of what I've learned from past experiences. So what I mean by that is, even since I was a little girl, I have kept some sort of catalog in my brain of all of the rules I or one needs to follow to keep everyone happy or satisfied or whatever word you want to put it. So if I were to hear my parents talk negative about another kid or, here, I'll give you an example. So my mom, when we were at church, the pastor's wife, and we were in the balcony, and the pastor's wife, of course, and her family were in the front row and down below. And she always looked great, and her kids looked great. You know, they had whatever cute dresses are. I mean, this is like back in the 80s, you know. So we all looked so cute, or they all looked cute. And, you know, in my mom's mind, we're just like your typical family or whatever. And so she would put down the pastor's wife and like, because, you know, she's got it all put together. So, you know, she's kind of, in some sense, trying to not make herself feel so less than. But in my mind, I'm hearing that as, oh, people actually will talk about you or put you down if you are too perfect,
Right.
and you make other people uncomfortable. So I need to make sure I don't make other people uncomfortable. I need to figure out how to be like everyone else so that everyone else feels good. Yeah. And so that's just like, but that, okay, the reason why that was an example is because fast forward, guess what? I became a pastor's wife.
Yeah.
So then I'm like freaking out in the front row, thinking about all the people behind me that are probably talking bad about me, and how can I make everyone like me?
It's your mom. Your mom's back there.
Right. Yeah. No, but this is what happens for the 9 is that we are listening to everyone's opinions, judgments, desires, wants. And it's like we have this catalog going in our mind of all of the ways that we need to live up to and make people happy in order to have this quote unquote right relationship, this peaceful relationship, this happy, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And you can't ever win. But we think we can. We're going to keep trying. But then we never are enough. And so 9s, I know, struggle a lot with the feeling of I'm not enough, because you can't make everyone happy to the level of what they want and need. But we are going to try, and then we're going to feel very discouraged and down basically at ourselves. We're not going to look at the other person and go, well, if you would just, you know, take care of yourself and I'll take care of me. No.
Everything would be better then, right?
Yeah, right.
TJ, I really want to set you up with this, but like I have not thought of 9s in rules. As a 1, I'm all about rules. But the thing that's going through my mind as you're talking is, oh, here it is. There's justice. There's harmony. There's the way that things ought to be. And conceiving of the rules is something that are delivered from the past to bring order to my present experience. So that's fantastic. The other thing that I'm hearing is judgment is, for me, is the primary force coming at me that I resist from others. Like I am hyper aware as a 1 of others' judgment, because it's about control and it's about their seeking to move me. And as you're speaking, I'm hearing something fairly similar going on there. And the rules, justice, judgment, all of that ends up being in the same soup, as it were.
And it's really hard because there are things that other people will have judgments about, and I will do my best to appease those judgments. I might merge, I might change my ways, I might become something. And I can't really even sit here and tell you in this moment, like, well, who and why and what, because there might be it might be the same person, different situation, or, and I'm not going to move at all. Like I'm going to have no cares that they have that judgment. Like I'm going to be stubborn, and I'm not going to move, and I am who I am. I mean, it's just like, we're kind of this really, I know we look kind of easy, but we are very complex people. And that's why I think, because we are so complex, that we just need to ignore ourselves and focus on others thinking that that will make life easy.
And notice the tension between that and what you said up front as your primary motive is somehow finding your true self. And obviously this will be one of the primary battles, I assume, for nines, is that merging is going to allow you to pacify with all these other folks. And they may be reckless, buffoonish human beings, yet the tension that's out there is something you intuitively feel.
Yeah.
How do I navigate in that world? And then the extra layer, and of course, but what I really want is I want to discover and name my true self and with clarity.
Well, and back to the rules, and I think you said this, but I just want to clarify. I mean, we all, are going to follow rules, but ours is very different than the type 1 rules or the 6 rules.
Yep.
Because you're following your inner critic and what is right and what is ethically, morally, procedurally correct. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't care about that, because I think, most humans, they do want to do what's right and don't want to get in trouble. For me, it has more to do with appeasing people and having that connection and harmony than it does if it's ethically and morally right.
Is that my assumption is that the rules that you have internalized come from past experience? Yes. I would assume that most nines, it may be very relational. Is it always relational?
Pretty.
I think that there is a level. It's like the rules that we all agree on to live in a society.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about specifically relationship in the same way that 2s, 4s, and 6s would be about relationships. It is about this is what it takes for all of us to function together. And if we're all going to do this and it's going to work, then we all have to agree on a certain set of rules.
Yep.
And so we need to know what our boundaries are about, understanding what maintains things where we're at.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, so then if you go to a different part of the United States or a different country, there might be a whole new set of rules that we have to learn. Because in the America that I'm around mainly, to go to a restaurant and people be really loud,
right,
is rude and disrespectful. Now that's why I'm saying in my neck of the woods, because there are other neck of the woods that that's just normal, and it's actually kind of weird if you're quiet. But in my 9 world, the way I grew up, it's you have to be quiet and respectful, and you don't want to bring too much attention to yourself. So those are the rules that I have learned in my upbringing. And then of course I bring it into my relationship. So it's with my husband, it's hey, you're not following my family's rules. You're wrong. Here's the rules that you need to follow. And him being a counterphobic 6, it's he's definitely not following the rules, and that creates tension because it's you're going to cause others to be upset because you're not following the family correct rules.
And it's not specifically about the relationship. It's about the fact that it will disrupt the peace of the harmony of it'll disrupt the environment.
Yeah. And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't feel a need to feel connected. Well, definitely to all people. I don't feel the need to connect with a lot of people. I am happy to connect with a few people on a deep level. But even that, I think if I'm being honest, I only have so much capacity for connection. I'm more concerned with, is there disruption in the force, in really the energy that is in and or around me. And I think that the energy that is less desirable is usually around when people are upset. They're dissatisfied, that whole negative space is usually what upsets our internal world. But I will say, and this is actually a good point, is that when my husband would play with our kids when they were really little, tickling them on the floor, and there's all this like laughter and joy, my whole body was like, oh my goodness, for the love, stop, But my eyes are and my mind is going, this is a good thing. This is great. Yeah. But my whole body is just screaming at me to make it stop, to have control of the situation. Mm-hmm. And so I had to learn, okay, they're fine. I need to remove myself in some way. Now, if I had AirPods back then that were noise canceling, that would have been helpful.
Solves the problem.
Right. Because I would still be able to enjoy the atmosphere, but not absorb the intensity as much. Yeah. And so I think that's something that's really helpful for me to say out loud, but also I think for people to understand about nines is this, and that's where I go back to that vibration, that energy, that disruption is really what we are trying to avoid.
Yeah. Circles back in my mind to you are taking in the world through your body, through your intuitive center, and that is your radar.
Yeah.
And it's pinging whether or not the world is right or good. It's a fantastic language for that. Wanted to circle back to just one quick thing, and it had to do with the source of anger and associating anger with fear. I imagine eights may say the same thing, and I would be curious if that's not associated with the stress move and not the anger, because my anger has zero fear associated with it in my mind and heart. It's 100% sadness. It's sadness. If I were to push into like what are some underlying things, and I suppose as you were talking, I was like, I wonder if there's not a tie there. Like I feel the anger, but it has, unfortunately, that it generally has a relational quality to it, as opposed to we don't have it on our questions, but I'm kind of blind myself to fear. And like this is not an emotion that I experience very often. It's very similar to nines and anger that just pops all of a sudden.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
I was going to say I would love to hear what you're going to say, because that's really interesting. Because I would say that my anger, it's going to be twofold. Because anger is usually a secondary emotion, and so I would say there is anger or fear of being maybe controlled or being overlooked, losing my voice, losing myself. But that then leads to sadness. So it's like they're almost two sides of the same coin.
Sure.
I don't know. What would you say?
Well, and thinking about it with fear, like for me, the connection to fear is much more about the effect that anger can have. It's not necessarily about like, I am not angry because I'm fearful. I am fearful because I don't know what my anger is going to do. Yeah.
Which is kind of going back to the 2-liter Coke. It's like, if this lid comes off, what is and it explodes all over everyone. What is the consequence, ramifications of that? Now, of course, you could use all different kind of analogies, but if we're all wearing like our Sunday best and all of a sudden I'm spewing all over everyone, that's not going to go over very well.
And what if it happens in the car? You're not going to get that out. It's going to be there. You're going to do damage forever to the inside of that vehicle, and it's going to take so much work to clean it up, and there's just so much connected with the kind of damage that my anger can cause.
And we think that if we just keep it bottled up, that it actually doesn't do damage, when actually it's doing just as much damage, but we ignore it because we are really great at disassociating from ourselves.
Coke doesn't just ruin the insides of cars. It also dissolves nails. So
It seems to me there's lots to be said about the underlying feelings and how we each engage them in terms of fear, shame, and anger. TJ has spoken a handful of times about being sort of oblivious to shame. And so some of our work has theorized something to the extent of the underlying feeling of your security move may be either last or like repressed, or I was using the word, we're kind of blind to it. I don't know if you experienced that as well, Beth. But if you were to say fear and anger are the primary feelings, that would make a lot of sense to me.
Let me see. Fear and shame. I don't think I've ever really thought about it because I definitely feel all of those quite a bit. I think if I'm being honest, because the reason why I brought up that thing about anger is that, or I mean, not anger, fear, is because he was asking me in a specific situation I was in with my brother, and I was upset and like wanting to rage. What was I feeling? And I said a bunch of things, and he's like, Beth, you missed the answer. It's fear. And I'm like, really? Because like all I could feel was the anger. But I think right next to the anger was shame, because that's why I was so upset. I was feeling so much shame by being taken advantage of, being belittled, being harmed. And so I think the fear comes out as well. So it's really just interesting. I've never really thought about, this trifecta, with the triads and how I, as a 9, work them out in what order. But I would say I think I'm more aware of my shame than I am my fear.
Well, and this also,
I'm sorry, you say you feel more in touch with the places where you feel relational anxiety and shame than you are with fear.
Yeah.
Bang. Okay.
Yeah.
It's again, this is just a place that we dabble and don't have anything clear.
well, and I think this is a good spot to remind ourselves and everyone listening that cultural experiences will have an impact. I was never a female raised in the American Christian Church in the late 20th century. You were, and you were taught a lot of things that I was not taught. And shame is one of those things.
Shame was, definitely. I mean, like literally, if you were in order, like I would just say, in order for one to grow in that era and in that faith community, you had to feel shame to propel you into what they said would be the correct way of growth or being.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Bang.
And I didn't get that. So
Yeah.
It was much, I shouldn't say I didn't get it. It was much easier for me to resist it.
Yeah. But you know what's interesting, and I can't remember if my conversation with my brother that I'm going to tell you about happened after our last conversation or before, but anyway, when he was home, I was like, because my parents always talked about weight loss and dieting and eating, and so, from like even 10 years old, I remember thinking about these things. And so there's just a lot and then our society just adds to it. So there was just a lot of body awareness and body shame or not actually seeing myself correctly. And so I brought it up to my brother and I was like, hey, did you get this same kind of message from mom and dad?
Nope.
And he was like, no, not at all. I'm like, what are
Didn't
you?
even
I'm like,
know.
my mind was blown. Because like we're in the same family. Like my dad just had his birthday the other day and we put together some, pictures, a slideshow, from our iPhones, they just kind of put it together. And one of the pictures in there was of my mom after she had some compression fractures. And so of course she's not looking her best, but she had gotten through like 50 days of rehab.
Sure.
So it's like resilience, right?
You may not look your Sunday best, but you look awesome for what you had
like
been going through. Yeah.
yeah, like you should be so proud. And the first thing she said after looking through those pictures was like, man, I looked really bad. Where was that? Or what, because, that was a kind of a place in life where she doesn't remember as much. And I'm like, Mom, you actually, that's a picture of resilience. Like, yeah, you may not look your best over the decades of your life, but I'm like super proud of like where you were in that moment and how we were able to get you from, because we were moving them from Kansas City to Nashville, that we actually could move you. Like you had gotten to that place. And, but so it just makes me sad to think that that generation brought in a whole different view and perspective of body. And I find this conversation and then the one I had with my brother very enlightening, because it's like I literally would never have thought that he did not pick up the same messages as I did from them.
It took us a few years to figure it out, but my sister and I have a memory of a specific conversation with our father where she heard something that impacted her view of her body for the rest of our lives. She's been struggling with it since then. And that was, we were both in middle school at the time. And I didn't remember the conversation.
Wow. Yeah.
Like after we talked it through a couple of times, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that happening. It didn't affect me in the slightest.
Yeah.
And it is one of the points that she can look at and say, this is why I have body issues.
Yeah. And what's interesting is us being both 9s, that was one of the rules I grew up living with, because it was so pressed upon me of the importance of it for there to be, I guess, a community, a piece that you should look or be a certain way. In us 9s, like we usually don't dress super flashy, we're kind of trying to kind of keep under the radar, blend in. And so you would do the same with your body, and the trends that you have, you're going to blend in with your community. These are the rules that we must follow.
Do you know your brother's type?
He's a 2.
Does that make sense of that in terms of your filter of that experience? The filter that a 2 would have versus what a 9 would have?
Yeah, I think more than that, let's see. I think part of it, he was also kind of the golden child. He kind of like did like
he's
everything.
An earner.
Yeah, everything he did was great, and like kind of, and so I just don't think that was a focus for my parents with him. And the interesting thing is it didn't need to be a focus with me, except for their fear of what could be in the future.
Sure.
But for him, that was never, So I think for him, it wasn't pressed upon at all.
Yeah, that's worthwhile. For those paying attention, and if you're familiar with the book that we release, the first 6 questions are about the intelligence center and stance, which we blew through in a variety of ways, a color. For those of you who are super informed, you will see all the beats. Moving into some other questions. You actually had started, and I thought...